stood under the awning, her hand clutching her umbrella tighter. The streets were nearly deserted, save for a few hurrying pedestrians wrapped in coats. The glow from La Veranda's sign illuminated her face, highlighting the mixture of pride and anticipation in her eyes. For months, she had dreamed of this moment, the chance to see her son thriving in a world so far removed from the humble beginnings they had shared. Amara Coleman wasn't a stranger to hardship. Born and raised in the small, segregated town of Harper's Ridge, she had learned early that life often demanded more than it gave. Her parents, both factory workers, had instilled in her a fierce sense of resilience and a belief that education was her key to a better life. She carried those lessons into adulthood, working tirelessly as a nurse while raising Michael as a single mother after his father left when he was just 2. Michael had been her world. From an early age, he displayed an uncanny talent for cooking, often experimenting with ingredients in their modest kitchen. Amara remembered the nights he'd stay up late watching cooking shows, scribbling down recipes in his notebook. She had done everything she could to nurture his passion, saving every spare dollar to buy him the tools and ingredients he needed to explore his craft. Her sacrifices had paid off. Michael earned a scholarship to a prestigious culinary school and quickly rose through the ranks of the culinary world, earning accolades for his innovative dishes. When he called her 3 months ago to tell her he had been hired as the head chef at La Veranda, her joy had been immeasurable. Now, standing before the restaurant, Amara felt a mix of emotions: pride, excitement, and a touch of nervousness. She hadn't told Michael she was coming, wanting to surprise him. She imagined the look of joy on his face when he saw her and couldn't help but smile. With a deep breath, she stepped inside. The interior of La Veranda was more magnificent than she had imagined. The chandeliers sparkled like diamonds, and the air was filled with the delicate aroma of truffle oil and freshly baked bread. Amara took a moment to soak it all in, her heart swelling with pride. As she approached the hostess stand, she noticed the sharp-dressed man who intercepted her. His name tag read Elliot Sturgis, manager, and his demeanor radiated authority. "Good evening," Elliot said, his tone polite but devoid of warmth. "Do you have a reservation?" "No," Amara replied, smiling. "I'm not here to dine. I'm here to see my son, Michael Coleman. He's a head chef." Elliot's face betrayed a flicker of confusion, followed by skepticism. "Michael Coleman?" he repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. "Yes," Amara said, nodding. "I'm his mother. I've traveled a long way to surprise him." For a moment, Elliot said nothing, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. Amara felt a pang of discomfort under his gaze, but she kept her smile steady. "I'm sorry," Elliot said finally, his tone dripping with condescension. "That's not possible." Amara blinked, taken aback. "Excuse me? Why not?" Elliot folded his arms, his expression hardening. "Because I don't believe you. Michael Coleman is the head chef of this establishment, a highly respected professional. Frankly, I find it hard to believe someone like you is related to him." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Amara's smile faltered, replaced by a look of incredulity. "Someone like me?" she repeated, her voice steady despite the sting of his words. "You know exactly what I mean," Elliot said, his gaze unwavering. "This is an upscale establishment. We don't allow walk-ins, and we certainly don't entertain baseless claims." Amara's cheeks flushed, a mixture of anger and humiliation washing over her. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. "Please," she said after a moment, her voice soft but firm. "Just let Michael know I'm here. He'll confirm everything." Elliot's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "I don't think so," he said. "Now, I suggest you leave before I call security." The humiliation was suffocating. Amara glanced around the room, catching the curious stares of diners and staff alike. She felt their judgment, their silent agreement with Elliot's dismissive tone. Without another word, she turned and walked out, her head held high despite the tears threatening to spill. As the doors closed behind her, the warmth of the restaurant was replaced by the biting cold of the storm. Outside, the rain poured harder, soaking her to the bone as she stood under the awning. Amara's mind raced, replaying the encounter over and over. She had faced racism and prejudice before, but this felt different, more personal, more cutting. For a moment, she considered calling Michael, but she quickly dismissed the idea. She didn't want to ruin his night or burden him with her pain. Instead, she clutched her umbrella and began walking back to her car, each step heavy with disappointment. As she drove away, the tears finally came, blurring her vision as she navigated the slick roads. She thought of Michael, of the countless sacrifices she had made to support his dreams, and wondered if he even knew how far she had come for him. In the warmth of La Veranda, Elliot Sturgis returned to his duties, his encounter with Amara already a distant memory. He had no idea that his actions would set off a chain of events that would change everything, not just for him, but for the entire restaurant. Michael Coleman stood in the bustling kitchen of La Veranda, the aroma of rosemary and thyme mingling with the sizzle of searing steaks and the bubbling of sauces. Clad in his crisp white chef's jacket, his name embroidered in elegant script, he moved with practiced ease, orchestrating the chaos around him like a maestro conducting a symphony. At just 31, Michael had become one of the youngest head chefs in the region, a feat that earned him admiration and envy in equal measure. He had worked tirelessly to earn this position, overcoming obstacles that would have crushed a lesser man. For Michael, the kitchen was more than a workplace. It was his sanctuary, a place where his creativity could flow freely and his vision could come to life. But tonight, something was off. As the dinner rush began to wane, Michael found himself distracted. He glanced at the clock on the wall, a habit he had developed over the years whenever his thoughts wandered. It was nearing 9, and the storm outside showed no signs of letting up. He wondered about his mother. Amara Coleman had always been his greatest supporter, the bedrock of his life. Growing up in a small, working-class neighborhood, Michael had watched his mother juggle multiple jobs to keep food on the table. She had been his first taste tester, his biggest cheerleader, and the one who taught him that dreams were worth chasing, no matter the odds. He often thought about her when he created new dishes, infusing flavors that reminded him of the meals they'd shared in their modest kitchen. She was supposed to visit him soon, but he hadn't heard from her in a few days. He chalked it up to her busy schedule, but the nagging feeling lingered. Meanwhile, in the restaurant's elegant front of house, Elliot Sturgis was reviewing the evening's revenue. The manager prided himself on running a tight ship. La Veranda's reputation as a premier dining establishment was due, in no small part, to his meticulous attention to detail. Elliot's journey to this position hadn't been as arduous as Michael's. Born into privilege, he had attended the best schools, secured internships through family connections, and climbed the ladder with relative ease. His polished exterior and commanding presence often masked his less savory qualities, an inherent sense of superiority and a willingness to make snap judgments based on appearances. The encounter with Amara earlier that evening barely registered as significant to him. In his mind, he had handled the situation appropriately, maintaining the restaurant's image and protecting its exclusivity. But as the evening wore on, whispers began to circulate among the staff. One of the servers, a young woman named Rachel, approached the kitchen with trepidation. Rachel was new to La Veranda, but she had already noticed the camaraderie among the kitchen staff, particularly their unwavering loyalty to Michael. She hesitated at the door, watching as Michael deftly plated a dish, his focus unwavering. "Chef Michael," she began, her voice barely audible over the clatter of pots and pans. Michael looked up, his dark eyes sharp but kind. "Yes, Rachel? There's something I think you should know," she said, wringing her hands nervously. Michael set down the plating spoon, his curiosity piqued. "What is it?" Rachel recounted the encounter with Amara as she had overheard it. A soaked woman claiming to be Michael's mother, turned away by Elliot in a manner that bordered on cruel. Michael listened intently, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief, and finally to anger. "My mother?" he asked, his voice low and measured, though his jaw tightened. Rachel nodded. "I didn't see her myself, but a few of the other staff members said she looked heartbroken when she left. I thought you should know." Michael felt a wave of emotions crash over him. Shock, guilt, and a simmering fury. His mother had come all this way to see him, only to be treated as though she didn't belong. He clenched his fists, his mind racing. "I need to speak to Elliot," he said, his voice calm but resolute. Elliot was in his office when Michael entered, the younger man's presence a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings. The tension in the air was palpable. "Michael," Elliot greeted, glancing up from his laptop. "What can I do for you?" Michael closed the door behind him, his gaze unwavering. "I heard about what happened earlier tonight," he began, his voice steady but carrying an edge. Elliot raised an eyebrow. "You'll need to be more specific." "My mother," Michael said, the words laced with restrained anger. "She came here to see me, and you turned her away." Elliot leaned back in his chair, his expression indifferent. "Ah, yes. That woman. She claimed to be your mother, but I found that hard to believe. She didn't exactly fit the profile." Michael's hands tightened into fists at his sides. "And what exactly does that mean?" Elliot shrugged, his tone nonchalant. "You've built a reputation here, Michael. I couldn't have someone disrupting the atmosphere or damaging our image." Michael took a step forward, his voice rising. "That someone is the reason I'm standing here today. She's the reason I became a chef. And you treated her like she was nothing." Elliot's expression hardened. "I was protecting the restaurant, Michael. Don't take it personally." Michael's laugh was bitter, filled with disbelief. "Not take it personally? That's my mother you humiliated. Do you have any idea what she's been through?" "What we've been through." Elliot opened his mouth to respond, but Michael cut him off. "I won't stand for this," he said, his voice firm. "You owe her an apology. And if you don't, I'll take this to the CEO myself." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Elliot's face. Michael didn't wait for a response. He turned and left the office, his mind already racing with plans to make things right. Michael stormed out of Elliot's office, his heart pounding with a mix of fury and disbelief. The bustling kitchen seemed quieter than usual as he entered, the staff casting wary glances in his direction. They could feel the tension radiating from him, his normally calm demeanor replaced with something much darker. "Rachel," Michael called, spotting her near the pastry station. She hurried over, her face full of concern. "Yes, chef. Do you know what time she left?" Michael asked, his voice softer, but no less urgent. Rachel hesitated. "I think it was about an hour ago." The rain was still heavy, and she looked upset. Michael nodded, his jaw tightening. Without another word, he grabbed his phone and stepped outside into the pouring rain, the chill biting at his skin. Amara was on the highway, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as she navigated the slick roads. The rhythmic beat of the windshield wipers did little to soothe her racing thoughts. She replayed the encounter at the restaurant in her mind, each word cutting deeper than the last. She had always known the world could be cruel, especially to someone like her, a black woman who had spent her life fighting for respect and equality. But she hadn't expected this kind of rejection from a place tied to her son's success. Her phone buzzed in the passenger seat, but she didn't reach for it. The tears streaming down her face made it hard enough to see the road. Back at the restaurant, Michael's calls to his mother went unanswered. Frustration and worry gnawed at him as he paced under the awning, the rain soaking through his chef's jacket. "Damn it, Mom. Pick up," he muttered, dialing her number again. He thought about their life together, the sacrifices she had made to ensure he had every opportunity to succeed. She had worked double shifts, gone without new clothes, and even skipped meals just to pay for his culinary school application fees. Michael could still remember the night he won his first cooking competition at age 16. Amara had stood in the front row, cheering louder than anyone else. She had hugged him so tightly afterward, whispering, "You're going to do great things, Michael. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you don't belong." The irony of those words now stung like salt in a wound. Elliot watched from the restaurant's front desk, his arms crossed as he observed Michael's frantic pacing. He couldn't deny the unease settling in his gut. Michael was more than just a head chef. He was the heart of La Veranda's success. His passion and talent had elevated the restaurant's reputation, and losing him would be a blow Elliot couldn't afford. But Elliot's pride held firm. In his mind, he had done nothing wrong. He had merely enforced the restaurant's standards, protecting its exclusivity. Rachel approached him cautiously, her voice low. "You know, you really crossed a line tonight." Elliot turned to her, his expression icy. "Excuse me?" She's his mother, Rachel said, her gaze unwavering despite her trembling hands. And you humiliated her. That's not protecting the restaurant. That's just cruelty. Elliot's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Michael finally decided he couldn't wait any longer. He grabbed his car keys and left the restaurant, determined to find his mother. He drove through the rain-soaked streets, his eyes scanning every sidewalk and bus stop for her familiar figure. As he drove, memories of their life together flooded his mind. He thought of the nights they spent in their tiny apartment, sharing meals she had prepared with love despite their meager means. He thought of the afternoons spent in the park, where she'd encourage him to dream big, her voice full of conviction. "You're going to change the world with your food, Michael," she had told him once, her eyes shining with pride. "Just promise me you'll never forget where you came from." He hadn't forgotten, but tonight he felt as though he had let her down. Amara finally pulled into the parking lot of a small diner on the outskirts of town. The neon sign flickered in the rain, casting a faint glow on her tear-streaked face. She needed a moment to collect herself before continuing her journey. Inside, the warmth of the diner was a stark contrast to the storm outside. Amara sat in a booth by the window, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. She stared out at the rain, her thoughts heavy. A part of her wanted to call Michael to let him know what had happened, but another part of her hesitated. She didn't want to burden him with her pain, not when he was already under so much pressure. Michael's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen, relief washing over him when he saw his mother's number. "Mom," he said, answering immediately. "Where are you?" "I'm fine, Michael," Amara said, her voice calm but tinged with exhaustion. "I'm at a diner. I just needed some time. I'm coming to get you," Michael said firmly, already turning his car around. "You don't have to." "Mom, please," Michael interrupted, his voice breaking. "Just tell me where you are." When Michael arrived at the diner, he spotted Amara immediately. She looked tired, her usual poise diminished but not broken. He rushed to her, his heart heavy with guilt. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he said, sitting across from her. "I had no idea. If I'd known, It's not your fault," Amara said, cutting him off gently. "You didn't do this." "But Michael, it hurt." Michael reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I promise you, this will never happen again. I'll make it right." Amara gave him a small, sad smile. "I know you will, son. You always do." The diner was quiet, save for the faint hum of the coffee machine and the soft patter of rain against the windows. Michael and Amara sat in silence for a moment, their hands still intertwined on the table. The storm outside had not abated, but inside, the storm that had torn through Michael's heart seemed to calm. His mother's presence, always steady and grounding, provided a balm to the anger and hurt that had threatened to overwhelm him. "I should have called you sooner," Michael said, his voice low. "I should have known something was wrong." Amara shook her head, squeezing his hand. "You've worked so hard, Michael. I didn't want to distract you from your dreams." "But what happened tonight?" she sighed, her voice heavy. "That wasn't just an insult to me. It was an insult to everything we've worked for." Michael's eyes darkened. Elliot has to answer for what he did. The resolve in his voice was unmistakable. Amara nodded slowly, her expression pained but understanding. She knew her son, knew his drive and his integrity. If anyone would make sure this wrong was righted, it was him. "Do you want me to come with you?" she asked softly. "No," Michael replied quickly. "This is something I need to do myself." The drive back to La Veranda was tense, the silence between mother and son filled with a growing sense of anticipation. Michael's thoughts swirled. He couldn't let Elliot's actions slide. The man had humiliated his mother for no reason other than his own prejudices and assumptions. But it wasn't just about that. There was more at stake here. Michael had spent years carving out a place for himself in a world that had too often been closed off to him because of his race. Every triumph, every achievement had been a battle. But tonight, the battle had taken a different turn. Now he was fighting for something even more important: respect. As they arrived at La Veranda, the rain had finally stopped, but the restaurant's imposing facade loomed before them like a fortress. Michael turned to his mother, his eyes filled with determination. "Wait here," he said. "I'll handle this." Amara gave him a long, searching look before nodding. I'm proud of you, Michael. Inside, the restaurant was still abuzz with activity as the dinner rush came to an end. The staff moved about with practiced precision, unaware of the storm brewing in the back office. Elliot stood behind the front desk, scrolling through his tablet, seemingly lost in thought. His indifference to the world around him was palpable, a reminder of just how far removed he was from the very people who made the restaurant thrive. Michael strode toward him, his presence commanding attention. Elliot looked up, a flicker of recognition crossing his face before his usual, unshakable composure returned. "Michael," Elliot said, his voice stiff. "I didn't expect to see you back so soon." Michael's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "We need to talk, Elliot." Elliot straightened, sensing the tension in the air. "About what, exactly?" "You know what?" Michael said, stepping closer. "You humiliated my mother tonight. For no reason other than your own prejudices." Elliot's expression hardened. "I told you, Michael, I was just following the protocols. We can't have just anyone walking in here and claiming to be related to our staff. I'm trying to protect the restaurant's reputation." "Protect the reputation?" Michael's voice was rising now, filled with anger. "You didn't protect anything. You attacked her. You treated her like she didn't matter, like she wasn't good enough to be here." The words hung in the air, thick with accusation. For the first time, Elliot faltered, his gaze shifting uneasily. "I didn't mean it like that," he said, his voice defensive. Michael took another step forward. "It doesn't matter how you meant it. The fact is you crossed a line, and now you're going to face the consequences." Elliot blinked, his confidence shaken for the first time in years. He opened his mouth to respond, but the sound of footsteps interrupted him. It was Victoria Hargrave, the CEO of La Veranda. Tall, poised, and commanding, Victoria had built the restaurant empire from the ground up. She was known for her sharp mind and unwavering standards, but she was also fiercely protective of the people who helped her succeed. "I think I know what's going on here," Victoria said, her gaze flicking between Michael and Elliot. Elliot straightened, his face suddenly pale. "Victoria, Victoria raised a hand, silencing him. "Michael, I understand you're upset, and you're absolutely right to be. I just spoke with Rachel, and I've heard the full account of what happened tonight. I'm disappointed in you, Elliot." Elliot's face flushed. "Victoria, please. I was just doing my job." "No, Elliot," Victoria said, her voice cold and firm. "What you did was not about doing your job. It was about discrimination, and that is something I cannot and will not tolerate in my restaurant." Elliot's eyes widened as the full weight of his actions hit him. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. "I've made my decision," Victoria continued. "Effective immediately. You're relieved of your duties as manager." Elliot's face twisted in disbelief. "You can't be serious." "I am," Victoria replied, her gaze unwavering. "You've put the reputation of this restaurant in jeopardy, and worse, you've shown a complete lack of respect for the very people who make it great. I don't tolerate that kind of behavior." Elliot's shoulders slumped, the arrogance that had once defined him now replaced by a hollow sense of defeat. He turned toward Michael, but the younger man's gaze was cold. "Get out of my restaurant," Michael said, his voice final. Elliot stood there for a long moment, his eyes darting between Michael and Victoria, before he finally turned and left without another word. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was a silence of resolution. Michael turned to Victoria, his heart still racing. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. Victoria gave him a small, approving nod. "You don't have to thank me, Michael. You earned this. You've worked hard to get where you are, and no one, especially not someone like Elliot, has the right to diminish that." "I won't forget this," Michael said, his eyes filled with gratitude. "But I also won't forget what I've learned tonight. This isn't just about my career. It's about the people who helped me get here, my mother, the staff, everyone who believed in me. And I'll make sure that no one ever feels like they don't belong here again." Victoria smiled. "I believe you will. You got a good heart, Michael. And that's what makes you a great chef and a great leader." Later that evening, Michael stood in front of the restaurant's large windows, gazing out at the city lights. His mind was still buzzing with everything that had happened, but he felt a sense of peace settle over him. His mother's presence, her love and support, had been the foundation of everything he had achieved. Tonight had been about more than just standing up to Elliot. It had been about protecting that foundation, about ensuring that the values he held dear would never be compromised. And for the first time in a long time, Michael knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. Thank you for watching. If you find this story interesting, please subscribe to my channel for more.